Good morning, good afternoon. It is freezing in Johannesburg. It feels like it is the dead of morning. However, thank you for joining us for our Monday coffee chat sponsored by the SA Property Investors Network. And as I said before, it's absolutely freezing in Johannesburg. But I want to know from you guys, what is the weather like where you are viewing us from? Firstly, I always want to say thank you for joining and welcome to all of you, and a special welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time. So if you could just let me know in the chat box so we can have a phenomenal show that's interactive and informative. So just let me know in the chat box where you are viewing us from, and also if it is your first time. And what is the weather like? Because right now, yeah, it's a bit scary. It's a bit scary. I think Mother Nature forgot that we are in Africa and in South Africa. So I'm not entirely sure about the snowing and these ridiculous colds. I know it's winter, but that's not the point. However, terrible weather aside, I look forward to today's episode because I'm super excited of it for one reason only. It's about women. Yes, we are kickstarting Women's Month with the phenomenal woman by the name of Marisia Robus, who I will introduce a little bit later. But I wanted to do something fun and quite interesting. Um, with regards to the disparity, because what we're talking about today is phenomenal women in property, and our guest is absolutely a trailblazer and a phenomenal woman. But I want to read for you guys, and this I don't want to say it was shocking, but it was a little uneasy for me. It was a little alarming to go, wow, we really still have a long way ahead of us. And this is a report for non-executive directors that was tabulated by the Practices and Fees Trends Report, right? And this is for 2023. And they're talking about non-executive directors in the top 100 JSE listed, pardon me, listed companies in the country. And the gender disparity, it's an interesting one. I mean, I understand that, we have a long way to go, but I didn't think it was this far. And I just want to read for you guys. It says gender representation, all NEDs, which is non-executive directors, including the chairpersons, is 30% women and 60% men. Then we move on to actual chairpersons. We have 85%, I beg your pardon, 86% men and 14% women. We also have gender representation in all NEDs, excluding chairpersons in the top 100 JSE listed companies in the country. And we have 41%, this is a bit better, 41% women and 59% men. And it goes on to say that, excuse me, on average, when it comes to chairmen and chairwomen, there is about a 60 to 40 and sometimes 70 to 30% difference. So if we're looking at JSE and then we look at property, the numbers get even smaller. And so what we want to do today is celebrate phenomenal women in property. And as I said, we have an exceptional guest that I'm going to be introducing a little later on. And she is going to just, tell us her obstacles, how long it took for her to get here, what are the things that make it difficult for her sometimes as a woman in this. And, this phenomenal woman by the name of Marisia Robus is actually the only, ladies and gentlemen, the only property inspector, roof inspector, and asbestos inspector in the country. It's phenomenal, but it's also sad because we shouldn't have one in the whole country. One. Ladies, come now. Why aren't we climbing roofs? Let's do this. It's cardio. It's workout. You can get some expertise. I'm not so sure about asbestos. However, we can't have Marisia carrying the weight of all of us on the property sector. However, as I said, we're starting off Women's Month phenomenally because we have an event on the 12th of August. I said this last week and I'll say it again until we get to the event. I am super excited for this. We have phenomenal speakers, like absolutely amazing. We have Nondo Miso Ngabai, we have Dr. Mavis, we have Saskia Cole. It's jam-packed. And if you were there last year, you will know how just a beautiful community we had in terms of the event. And ladies left with gifts, with knowledge, with information, with contacts, with networking, with a community and a stable place for them to actually ask questions and understand. And if you want to be part of this community, you don't necessarily have to wait for the talk. You can actually join our memberships at the SA Property Investors Network. Just go to our website and we will give you a call. As I said, if you are new here, we don't quite understand what we do, but we are a network of individuals who are like minded. So we teach, we connect, and we engage. It's standard. That is what the SA Property Investors Network do. And as I said, I would love to know where you guys are viewing me from. I'm talking to you from the terribly cold Johannesburg. But I would love to hear from you guys as to where you are viewing me from, and also even more especially if it is your first time. So for more events, there is a link in the chat box, and we're going to be talking about all of the events. But the most pressing one, you guys have to get your tickets on the 12th of August, and it is the Women's Day event. However, without further ado, let me introduce this trailblazing lady. I love always reading her bio because it really is quite phenomenal. It gets to a point where you go, wow, if one woman can do this, then all of us can. And that's always the point, to say that you pay it forward. So each one teach one. And this phenomenal lady, so I'd like to read her insight. It says Marisia Robus is a property inspector as well as an ITC certified roof inspector with 12 years construction NABISA master certified. She specializes in doing full home inspections and due diligence inspectors for commercial, industrial properties, maintenance inspection for houses, townhouses, complexes, and commercial and industrial properties. So she covers every single nook and cranny of properties. It does not matter which sector you are trying to invest in. And also, she is a female practice. She's the only female practicing ITC certified roof inspector in the country. Marisha's father, who is now late, Albert van Beek, is the author of the Proud Home Owners book that she also collaborated in engaging with. And also she has a maintenance course, which I'm also very, very amped about, that we're going to be discussing a little bit later. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, can I please have hand clap emojis in the chat box? And can we have a huge round of applause for Marisia Robus? Marisia, how are you?
Hello, Kali. Nice to see you on a very cold day in Joburg. I agree with you. I tell you, my inspection this morning was freezing. I actually forgot to take my beanie with, but I put it in the car. So for the next time it's this cold, I can at least put my beanie on.
Yes, the cold snuck up on us. But as women, we go in. We literally do the most no matter what. And that is what we're discussing today. Phenomenal women in the property space. So like Marisia, who will go into the cold and do your inspections as a property investor, whether she has a beanie or not. Because she is a phenomenal woman. So Marisia, the first question is always the standard one. And that is, how did your journey begin?
Kali, my dad had a construction company for 35 years, and I nagged him from a young age that I wanted to come into the construction company with him. And he always said to me, no, it's not a place for a woman. And I was a bit upset about that. And one day we attended the Star Home Show. And we were walking along, and he said to me, oh, Montague Properties built this house. Do you know that the owner and CEO of Montague Properties is a woman? Well, I flipped my lid, and my dad and I had this huge argument at the Star Home Show. And I said to him, don't you ever tell me again that as a woman, I can't come into property. Shortly after that, I joined him in the construction company, and I loved every minute of it. He took me to site every day for the duration of a house that he built, and I learned everything from the foundations up. And then he would send me, while they were digging the foundations, he would say to me, okay, go back to the office, go and measure on the plans how much concrete we must order and how much steel we must order for the foundations. And so I learned everything about construction from the ground up. And the beauty of the thing is my dad would say to me, the plasterers are mixing the plaster mix wrong. You are going to have this and this type of crack. Every day after the plasterers were finished, they had to wet the plaster. And I was like, why? And he said, the plaster has to dry slowly. Otherwise, you will have plaster cracks. If it was a western wall, it always had to be plastered in the morning before the hot sun got to it. And those walls had to be watered more often. And if the wind was blowing from a specific direction, that wall also had to get more water. And then later, when we started our inspection company, my dad would say to me, you remember on site I told you ABC? Well, this crack you're seeing here is because the plasterer didn't do that, or the bricklayer did that wrong. And that is what I believe is my strength. That my dad taught me from the beginning what is going wrong behind the crack, behind the plaster. Why is there a crack there? Why is there damp there? Go and look for the reason at the back, and so on. And that is very, very powerful to me.
I couldn't agree more, Marisia. I don't think the average person knows these things. That, if it's a certain wall, you might want to put in more water. I'm learning as the viewers are learning, because I'm going, who knew? Because we are normal people. We're just simple people. And we go, okay, cool, just plaster and you're good to go. We didn't know that Marisha's going to come to us 2 years later and go, had you done this, this would never happen. However, I also mentioned in your introduction that you are the only female roof inspector, which by itself, I was asking the viewers, I'm like, ladies, come now, why aren't we climbing in roofs? It's cardio, we're working out. But I want to know for you, because it's something that's so out of broad in terms of women. What obstacles have you encountered as the only female roof inspector?
Kali, when you say that I'm a roof inspector, it means that when new roof trusses are erected on a house or property that's busy being built, then an ITC inspector or an engineer has to go out and inspect whether the trusses were erected correctly, whether all the bolts are in place, whether the nails are in place, whether the trusses are straight or leaning over. And there's a whole lot of things you need to look at. So when I arrive on a building site, normally the plasterers are busy plastering, and I get some very strange looks. And I always ask, is there a site foreman here, just to inform him that I'm here and I'm coming to check the roof trusses? And I get a lot of frowns, like, oh, this lady is coming to check the roof. And a lot of times, it's difficult to get to the first floor. Maybe the stairs haven't been erected yet. I then take my ladder out my boot, put it up, climb onto the first floor slab and go and check the roof. And I get a lot of frowns. But the most opposition I get is when I do snag list inspections. Because I arrive on site and the builders, number one, are defensive. Because why does their client now want a snag list inspection done? The building is perfect. And then I arrive there and they look at me, and here's a woman. And I've had some builders actually say to me, what do you know about construction? And if they catch me on a bad day, the one case, the builder was exceptionally rude, wouldn't allow me on site, and eventually after a long hoo-ha, allowed me on site. And when I climbed out, said to me, what do you know about construction? And I lost it. And I stood at my car door. I hadn't even closed my door, and I looked around and I said, obviously more than you do. That inspection eye is under the paving. It's not allowed. The paving is not sloping away from the garage. That's not according to building regulations. The floor level of the house is not 150 millimeters above ground level, which is illegal. And I named 7 things standing at my car that were not done according to building regulations. He just looked at me, climbed in his car and drove off. So that is where I get my most opposition, is on a building site when I do snag list inspections, because the problem is that the builders are nowadays, they do not build according to regulations. They use the laborers they use on site are not skilled. When my dad had his construction company, all of his artisans had been to artisan school, and they were trained as bricklayers, as plasterers, as tilers, as carpenters to put ceilings in, to hang doors and everything. But nowadays, they are not skilled anymore because artisan school doesn't exist. And then the next problem is that the site supervisors are not skilled. So where I arrive on site and I see the plasterer is doing something wrong, I try and find the site supervisor to tell him, listen, the plasterer is doing ABC wrong. You should do it this way. The site supervisors are not skilled enough to pick that up. And that is where you get all of these major, major problems with new buildings. And if people don't do a professional snag list, they pick up issues later and the builder just says, your 3-month snag period is over. I'm not repairing anything. And you sit with a huge maintenance bill and you have to do maintenance much sooner because the building was not constructed correctly.
It's very interesting you say that in terms of, doing snag lists as investors. And the fact that a lot of people sometimes overlook it because they have faith or trust in the contractors, and then the people actually in construction. But now you're pointing out that it's actually very valuable to have a property inspector who will in turn save you a lot of money later on. But because we're talking about women, I now want to know, are there a lot of women in the construction or property industry?
Kali, there are a couple of women who have construction companies, but they are in the minority. But I do know that there are a lot of women property investors because I do a lot of inspections for them. And if you have a look at the data from the banks, you will find that more than 50% of the home loans are being awarded to women. So women are buying more property than men. And I know there are a lot of women property investors.
That is great. I do know those stats that saying we're finally here. We're finally here where women investors in property ownership is surpassing their male counterparts because it's taken us a long time to get here as women. And also I want to just say to you guys watching us from home, if you have any questions for Marisia as a phenomenal woman in the property space or as an inspector, property inspector, roof and asbestos inspector, please put your questions in the chat box. I will make sure that she gets to answer them a little bit later. And as we continue with the phenomenal woman, I want to know this because this has always been something that always intrigues me. And that is, what is the most extreme inspection you've ever encountered?
Oh, Kali, that's a long list. But the worst and extreme property inspections are always snag list inspections. I find that the builders do a lot of things wrong. And when they are cornered about it, they turn around and say, I've been building like that for 20 years. And my answer is, you've been building wrong for 20 years. And I do regularly snag list inspections, and I find 10 to even up to 25 items that are not done according to national building regulations. Now, you must remember, as a property or as a homeowner, you are within your rights to expect your house to be built according to the approved building plans, according to national building regulations, and the NHBRC guidelines. I was featured on the Devi show last night with a snag list inspection I did, and the builder just ignored everything, told me and my client, we don't know what we're talking about. And it took my client 2.5 years and the Devi show before he could eventually move into his house. The major items that are normally done wrong are the things that cause the most damage. For instance, damp. In my opinion, damp is the biggest problem in South African houses, and that is due to a construction error. If you look at the outside of a plastered house, you'll see a little line drawn in the plaster. Now, that is supposed to be a joint at the DPC level, which is a damp proof course. And the plaster is supposed to be broken there. So, what happens is the DPC is supposed to protrude the wall. Water travels up through capillary action, it hits the DPC and then goes down. But now the plasterers plaster wrong. So they plaster the entire wall and draw a line in the plaster, and the water travels up all the way, and you have peeling and bubbling paint. Now, if it was done correctly, you wouldn't have this damp problem. And depending on how they fitted the DPC, you will eventually have damp coming into the house. And that is a huge problem because damp eventually leads to mold growth inside the house, and that is a health risk. The other reason why I am very pedantic about national building regulations is that homeowners must remember that if your house is not built according to national building regulations and you have a claim relating to that, insurance is not going to pay. The fine print in your insurance document says number one, your house has to be built according to national building regulations. And then number two, you have to do regular maintenance. If you don't clean your gutters, if you don't clean your valleys, and you have roof leaks, insurance won't pay. And in the case of if your house is not 150 millimeters above ground level, the finished ground level outside, and you have a flood and the water goes into the house, insurance is not going to pay because your house is not built according to regulations. There are numerous things like that. A firewall between the house and the garage, a fire door between the house and the garage, and numerous things like that. If the geyser is not installed according to regulations and the geyser bursts, insurance won't pay. So all of these things are very, very important. But
That
you
is
asked about uh, interesting inspections. I have one client who saved 3.5 million rand on the purchase of his industrial property just because he asked me to do a maintenance inspection for him. The gutters on the property the gutters were giving problems, and they asked the landlord, and the landlord said, no, it's not serious, just need to clean the gutters, and left it until I climbed on top of that roof. It was a tough roof inspection because it was 15,000 square meters under roof, so I was exhausted after that day. But the gutters were totally blocked, rusted through. The downpipes in some cases weren't connected. The flat roof's waterproofing was non-existent. You had weeds growing on the roof in the cracks, and there were asbestos roof sheets. And the buyer said, my client, that the seller must replace the gutters and downpipes, which was 1.75 million rand. He had to re-waterproof all the flat roofs and remove and replace the asbestos roof sheets. Total of 3.5 million rand, which the seller had to spend before my client would buy. So that is a huge saving, and that is where people must think of the long game if they want to say, do I want an inspection or don't I? Because you must remember, you can save a lot of money on the purchase price, but then also you will know what maintenance to do when, and you will save money in the future as well.
that is amazing, Rosh. A whole 3 point. So basically, with that saving, he essentially could buy another property just
Exactly.
from a saving. And as I finish off with the questions before we go on to the live questions, I've always wanted to know this. And like we said, we're celebrating phenomenal women in the property space. In your opinion, how can we get more women involved in the property space on all aspects?
Kali, I'm a NABISA Master Certified Inspector, which is the National Association of Building Inspectors of South Africa. And from 2016 to 2019, I was part of a task team who designed a building inspector qualification, We are waiting for SACWA to approve it. We are holding thumbs and crossing fingers and toes and everything that it will be done, we're hoping by September. Once that qualification has been approved, we are then going to go on a major marketing drive, because then people can go and do the qualification, get some experience, and become a property inspector. We at the moment, there is one company who is presenting this course, and UJ is interested in presenting it, and we are sure that the other universities will take it up again. So once that qualification is ready, I will really hope that the woman will come and do the course and then come and get some experience and become property inspectors. And the big thing is, I don't know why women would turn away from becoming a property inspector, because it's not as if you're a building contractor and you're on site and getting dirty, although I enjoy that. But you go into a property and you go and see what the defects are, and you are helping people. To me, it is such a thrill when I can say to my clients, listen, here's a problem. This is how you repair it. This is what it's going to bring. And in the end, they know that the property they're buying is not going to cost them an arm and a leg in a year's time on something they didn't know about. So once we've got this qualification, I really hope to see a lot of ladies joining me.
No, I think that's amazing, Marisha, especially as I mentioned earlier with the concept of each one teach one. So the fact that you've developed and you are in hands-on in terms of providing the education, because once you open up the platform, then those who want to, those who are willing will absolutely join. But it's always the case, it's the access to the information that a lot of the time people don't know, and more especially women. So, I applaud you for that one. That's pretty awesome, Marisha.
Thanks.
So now we're going to, pardon me, the questions. Sam Pule wants to know, hi, is the builder compelled to fix what you find wrong during the snag list inspections? And where can one report the non-compliant builder?
Okay, thank you, Sam. Yes, the builder is compelled to repair the snags. And you must remember that within the building contract, you have a 3-month or 90-day snag period. So you have to inform the builder of the snags within the first 90 days. If he does not repair the snags, you report him to the NHBRC. Now, the NHBRC, unfortunately, have their quirks. So if it is a contractual thing, let's say, for instance, the contract said the builder must install aluminium window frames and he went and installed steel window frames, the NHBRC is not going to get involved in that. They're going to say, that's a contractual dispute, you sort it out between yourselves. But anything else, bad plaster work, joints at DPC level not being done correctly, a fire door not being fitted, and things like that, the NHBRC will say to the builder, you have to repair that, and they normally give him 21 days in which to repair it. Now, the other problem is that the builder can dispute things, and that is when you need to get an attorney involved. And the other thing is that if you are doing alterations are not enrolled with the NHBRC, only new build. So only if you construct a house or a block of flats or something from scratch, it has to be enrolled with the NHBRC. If you are doing alterations or additions, then it doesn't. Then, unfortunately, it will have to go to mediation and to an attorney. And the one tip I want to give people, if you are doing alterations or additions, please, number one, sign a contract with a builder. Make sure you get a written quote from the builder, what is included, what is not. And with your building contract, please complete absolutely complete specifications schedule. Even to the last thing of the builder's going to buy the bricks, you buying the cement, or you buying the bricks and cement and the builders giving the labor, the builders buying the tiles and the tile glue, whatever, go into as much detail as you can. Because you must remember that a lot of builders want to deceive the clients. So they quote low so that you will accept their quote. And then when you come and you say, okay, well, I want those tiles, he said, no, but I only allowed 60 Rand per square meter tiles. And you say, but what can I get for 60 Rand a square meter? If you had specified it on the specification schedule and signed it with your contract, then there's no dispute. You must also, when you do alterations, make sure that you know what the builder quoted for. A lot of people will say 15,000 Rand for a kitchen, but they exclude the worktops and the installation of the kitchen. They might exclude, the one builder might include the stove and the zinc and the taps and everything, and the other builder excludes it. So make sure you sign a contract, and then number 2, a specification schedule. Now, if you don't have a contract or a specification schedule, you can head over to my website, gautenginspect.co.za, and there's a tab that says Proud Homeowner Downloads, and there you can find a payment schedule, a contract, and a specification schedule. Please sign that. Do not go on word of mouth or just take the quote and then pay the builder on as far as that. Very important.
Those are amazing nuggets there. But we keep it going with the questions. Some Carlo wants to know, are there any concerns regarding what type of roofing materials used? How do you go about the inspections for different types of roofs?
Okay, so the biggest thing with roofs are the slope. So a tiled roof, the minimum slope of a tiled roof is 17 degrees, and then it must have an approved underlay. So that plastic you see under the tiles. If a tiled roof is more than 26 degrees, you don't need to have under tile plastic. Sheeted roofs, minimum slope is 5 degrees. But that is normally for a carport. On a house, I wouldn't do a sheeted roof that's 5 degrees. Slate roofs is a totally different thing. So you need to make sure, first of all, that the trusses can take whatever covering you're putting onto it. Please remember, if you've got a sheeted roof, you cannot now, because the roof sheets are starting to rust, put roof tiles on top of it. Sheets are much lighter than roof tiles, and the trusses are constructed differently. The only thing you can put on top of roof sheets are Harvey tiles because they're very light. So you cannot use the roof trusses that were designed for sheeted roof and change it to a tiled roof. And then very importantly, sheeted roofs need to be spray painted. Don't paint them by hand. You get much better coverage and you will get a lot longer life on the paint if you spray paint them. And you should check your roofs regularly. Make sure that they're clean, that the leaves are not packed onto flat roofs or sheeted roofs, and that the water will cause the roofs to start rusting through. And on tiled roofs, keep the valleys clean.
That is actually quite interesting. I didn't know there were this many variations in terms of roofing. And as
Yes.
we get to our last question from Joa, he wants to know, says, hi, Kali. Hello. How would your guest advise women to get into the construction industry? Do they have to physically learn skills such as bricklaying? Is there a better way to understand the technical aspect of it?
Okay, so this is where my comment previously came in when I said that the site supervisors don't have the skills. If you want to get into construction, for you to register with the NHBRC as a builder, you now have to do an exam. I would strongly suggest that you also do a course which is offered on national building regulations, that you know your building regulations and that you understand them and why they are important. As a builder, you must make sure that the house is constructed as per building regulations. And you must remember, there are a lot of regulations. from the foundation up to the roof, to energy saving, to glazing, to plumbing, electrical. There is a lot of stuff. And if you're going to go into construction without this knowledge, in my opinion, you're not going to last long, because your houses or buildings that you build will not be of good quality, and the people will badmouth you and you will lose business. So, very important that you learn the skills. And I would do a couple of courses regarding building regulations, and definitely make sure that you do the NHBRC course and make sure that you understand everything.
Hmm. And as I was saying, you were mentioning that we have one more question. This one is from Dean Naidu. It says, "Hi, can I trust a roof that's been painted over rust?" I can tell you that for free. That's no. However, Marisha, do you want to give the answer to that?
Okay, so if a roof is rusted, it should be sanded. First of all, you must sand all the rust off and then treat it with a rust-proof agent. Now, if the rust is very deep, you are going to sand through the rust. You have to assess the roof and see how much rust is there, and maybe you can just sand half the rust off, treat it with a rust-proof agent, and then rubberize the sheeted roof. The new rubberizing products are great, and they really protect the sheeted roofs. So a sheeted roof, if it's quite rusted, I would rather rubberize it. And another thing that clients must remember, the old houses. I did an inspection this morning of a house in Brixton. I mean, that house I think is older than I am. And the roof sheets on there are still fantastic, because the old roof sheets are 0.95 millimeters. And today, if you buy new roof sheets and you want to spend a lot of money, the most you can get is 0.5 millimeters. So the old roof sheets are much thicker, and I advise to rather try and save them. Remove all the loose paint, sand them, treat them with a good rust-proof agent, and you can either paint them or rubberize them.
Okay. All righty then. Well, Marisha, I want to say thank you so much, as the phenomenal woman you are, for being our guest today. And I do know that you are also going to be joining us on the 12th of August for our annual Women's Day event. Am I right?
Yes, definitely, Kali. I will be there, and I just want to encourage the ladies that they better book their ticket very quickly. We only have space for 150 ladies. Last year, we packed the venue, 150 ladies. We had phenomenal speakers, and it was a really great event. And remember, ladies, 150 seats are all that we have. So you better book quickly. You do not want to miss this event.
Fantastic. That is absolutely true. From one phenomenal woman to another, I want to say thank you so much, Marisha, for joining us.
Thank you, Kali. See you soon. Bye.
Bye. Alrighty then, ladies and gentlemen. As we stated before, Beyonce says thank you. As I stated before, we are going to be having the annual Women's Day event happening on the 12th of August. So please get your tickets. And unfortunately, gentlemen, you can't join. However, you can buy one for your wife. You can buy one for your sister, your mom, your niece. We have Sapin Youth. So all the lovely ladies that you have in your life, you can definitely get them tickets for this event. And outside of that, I want to always say thank you very much for joining. And if you have any questions or have anything you'd like to know, then please do not hesitate to contact us on our website. And the link is in the chat box. As always, from me to you,